Let's talk about religion and religion class. That was also a quite funny scenario. I remember the religion teacher was like the final lesson before receiving our certificates or receiving the grades after 1 year. And I remember we were all discussing our grades, or the teacher was talking to each individual student. I always hated that process. I really hated it. I hated school overall during that time. And we were talking about that, talking about the grades and the performance of the individual students, their development, stuff like that. And then she came to me and said in front of the whole class that she had no access to me. She had no way of reaching me. So that was quite strange to hear as I don't know, how old are you in grade 5, 6, like 12 or something like that, 11, 12. And the same thing happened. In Germany. We have to do like a year of a church class at the age of, I think it was like 14, 15 or something like that. So we spend time with a preacher. So this is like a class where you meet your former classmates. You all come together and have like a little sit-in once a week or once every other week. And then you talk about the Bible and society and how the Bible relates to our social life, and lots of different things. I mean, not a very boring thing, but it was not a very boring thing, but I was not really into the whole Bible study thing. And after that year, we had the same thing basically as in school. The teacher evaluated our process and talked a little bit about each individual student. We were like 15 students or something like that. And he said exactly the same thing. He said, Jacob, I have no access, I cannot reach you, something like that, something along these lines. And the most important point is, if that had happened with all other teachers from all other subjects, this would be not worth reporting here, but it was just these two instances. So it was just these two religion classes, basically. Yeah, I mean, there were some instances in primary school as well where we had to paint a figure that stands on the field that farmers used to scare off birds. I don't know the name for that in English, and we had to draw like a conventional figure that is really used on the fields. And what I did, I painted a monster, basically a vampire with blood spilling out of the mouth. And I mean, that was worth a lot of discussion in the class context and at school in general on the teacher panel, I think. The other situation I would like to mention that relates directly to the heading or to the topic of this video. My father told me, this was, I don't know how old I was at that time, let's say 10, 12, 13, something like that. I was pretty young. And he told me about a dream he had when he was on a business trip. I think he was somewhere around the Philippines, and as far as I remember, he reported that there was a storm at night, and then he fell asleep and had that particular dream I will tell you about. So at the time we were living in the north of Germany. I'm still in the north of Germany, but not exactly where I lived as a child or teenager. And he was on our property. We had an old farm property that was not a farming business anymore. So it was like a refurbished buildings and stuff like that. That was a really nice looking property. And on that property, my father was walking the dog. We had a black Hoverwart. That's the race of the dog. It's a dog similar to a Labrador, but maybe a bit bigger, taller. And the dog ran away from him And I think the dog was like, let's say 20, 50 meters away from him. And then he called the dog back to him. The dog wouldn't come, and then the dog turned towards him and basically stood up. So the dog moved into a human-looking shape or a human-looking figure, what he described as being the devil. So he described that figure as the devil. The devil looked at him in that situation, showed him his tongue. So the devil looked at my father and showed him his tongue and smiled at him. And then he moved on and disappeared into the next building. So he opened a door that was not there. So he just opened the door in the building and vanished inside of the building. So I think there are many different interpretations of this dream. Of course, the dream symbolizes or represents his own fears at the time. The dream also most likely represents his conscience that was plaguing him. He never really had a good relationship. That was we never really got along well with each other. We had a lot of fights, verbal fights that almost turned into physical fights. I mean, a lot of discussions and basically, I mean, I was most of the time, like, if you like to call it that way, I was like the black sheep in the family. If there was anything that happened, I was quite often the one to look for it or to look out for. I think the darkness that was symbolized through this figure in the dream was much closer to my father than he was aware of. And I felt that darkness early on in my life, inside of me. I felt that darkness. And I mean, I broke the bond with my father a long time ago, and it shattered his whole life. So in a sense, what I gained from this darkness and how I connect with that figure in the dream that he himself experienced, I felt the darkness early on. I felt the devil inside of me early on, not in a bad way, not in the way that we have been taught in religion classes and stuff like that, not in any form like that. I felt that darkness, that darkness, that feeling, that knowing, that deeper knowing that there was something different inside of me, something else that was telling me to push something into this world I was not really aware of at that time. So the darkness was not only closer to my father than he was aware of, the darkness may also have been very much closer to myself or within myself, inside of myself, than I was aware of. And so in a sense, darkness brought me liberation and a sense of freedom.